The lie always sounded the same. He's just like a brother. Natalie's words hung in the air like perfume, pleasant, rehearsed, and meant to fade, but Daniel had stopped breathing it in long ago. She said it with a laugh once when Jared handed her a glass of wine at dinner, again through a smirk when Daniel noticed his name lighting up her phone late at night, and most recently, too recently, when she stood near the fireplace, texting with a softness she no longer used on her husband. Daniel saw the message by accident. He hadn't meant to glance, hadn't planned to spy, but there it was. Wish you were here instead, followed by a winking emoji. She didn't even flinch when she sent it. He said nothing. That night, Natalie climbed into bed, smelling like citrus and someone else's attention. She kissed Daniel's cheek like a habit, and he led her. The house around them was filled with curated warmth. Framed photos of ski trips, anniversary dinners, and the wedding DVD lined neatly on the shelf in their living room. Daniel's eyes lingered there as she fell asleep. It was still in its original case, untouched for years, wedged between Christmas movies and travel documentaries they never watched. He got up quietly and pulled it from the shelf. The case creaked faintly like something waking up. The disc gleamed. That day, their day, was captured in shaky camcorder footage and earnest vows. Natalie had cried. He had smiled like a man who believed her. Daniel sat with it in the dark for a while. Then he found a post-it note, his handwriting steady. Thought you'd want to know who she really belongs to. He slid the note inside the case and resealed it. The next day, while Natalie was at brunch, laughing, probably texting just a friend, Daniel walked to the post office and mailed the DVD directly to Jared. No return address, no warning. Just a gift from the past to shatter the present. And he waited, not for a reaction, not for a fight, just for silence, the kind that speaks when the lie finally lands flat. Natalie didn't notice the DVD was gone. She didn't notice much these days, at least not when it came to Daniel. She still spoke to him with the effortless familiarity of a woman who assumed she'd already won the emotional war. Could you grab oat milk on your way back? Don't forget Jared's coming by next week to help with the deck lights. Jared, again. Daniel just nodded, his face unreadable, his hands steady even when his stomach twisted. It fascinated him how easy it was to become invisible when you stopped reacting. Natalie had mistaken his silence for defeat. It was, in fact, the first step of his exit. Jared's number stopped showing up on her phone after a few days. No explanation, no flare-up, just absence. At first, Natalie pretended not to notice, but Daniel watched her linger longer near her phone in the evenings. She scrolled, refreshed, double-checked her notifications. Her fingers tapped out a message one night while she thought he wasn't watching. She typed, hesitated, and erased. Then she typed again, faster, more urgently. Daniel said nothing. The message remained unsent. The next morning, Natalie was unusually quiet. She poured her coffee, black this time, no oat milk. She stood at the kitchen window for a while, staring out as if waiting for something, or someone, to appear. Daniel picked up his briefcase and left the house like any other day, but unlike before, he didn't look back. Later that week, Jared's silence turned into a void Natalie couldn't hide from anymore. The late-night laughter stopped. The spontaneous makeup sessions ended. She didn't bother curling her hair. She didn't wear the perfume Daniel used to compliment. He noticed the unraveling, not with satisfaction, but with confirmation. Natalie came home early one evening, distracted and jumpy, holding her phone like it was a foreign object she didn't know how to command anymore. She glanced at Daniel as he read on the couch, but he didn't return the look. That unnerved her more than anything. Hey, she said, too casually. Have you heard from Jared? I've been trying to reach him. He was supposed to help with the lights this weekend. Daniel turned a page in his book. No, he replied, his tone even, unmoved. Haven't heard a thing. She waited for more, for suspicion, for a jab. But Daniel just kept reading, as though Jared was exactly what he had always claimed to be. Nothing. Natalie crossed her arms, the flicker of panic behind her eyes barely masked by a forced smile. It's probably just busy, she said, mostly to herself. Daniel finally looked up. Maybe. Man, that was all. That night, Natalie didn't sleep well. She kept shifting beside him, the bed sheets rustling as if trying to bury her unease. At one point, she slipped out of bed and left the room, only to return 15 minutes later. Her phone screen lit up with desperate thumb swipes in the dark. Daniel didn't need to see the messages to know what she was typing. He lay awake beside her, eyes closed, breathing slow, listening to her come undone by the weight of her own choices. The silence between them was no longer just tension, it was judgment, and Natalie felt every second of it. 2 days later, Daniel opened the closet, removed the last of his things from the top shelf. and zipped up his overnight bag. He had already transferred what mattered: documents, keys, photos, from drawers into storage. He had been preparing for weeks, methodically. While Natalie dismissed his stillness as weakness, she came home to find his side of the closet empty. Her first reaction wasn't panic, it was confusion. Only after checking the DVD shelf and seeing the gap did her stomach twist. I was gone. Only then did she understand. The silence that followed Daniel's departure wasn't loud. It didn't slam doors or echo with angry footsteps. It crept in slowly, a subtle erosion of normalcy. At first, Natalie didn't fully grasp it. She walked from room to room, trying to convince herself he just stepped out for groceries or gone to clear his head. But the longer she lingered in the doorway of their bedroom, the more evident it became. Daniel wasn't coming back. His things were gone. Not hastily thrown together, but carefully selected. No loose ties, no overlooked toiletries. The space he once occupied in the closet was hauntingly empty. It was surgical, precise, and intentional, like the man himself. She opened a drawer where his watch used to sit. Empty. His keys, the ones he always left on the hook by the door, gone. And then she saw it, the shelf. Not the entire shelf, but what was missing from it, the wedding DVD. The realization struck like a blow to the ribs. Not because she'd forgotten its existence, but because she never thought it would be important enough to him to take. Natalie sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, trying to process what the absence of that single item meant. It wasn't for sentimental reasons that he took it, no. If Daniel had wanted to remember her, he would have kept a photo. If he had wanted to make a scene, he would have confronted her. This was something else. A message. And she was starting to decode it. The day dragged, filled with anxious pacing and unanswered calls. She tried Jared again, voicemail. She messaged him on every platform they'd ever used. Read receipts showed nothing. Not even the cold courtesy of a scene. By sunset, she began to understand the weight of what Daniel had done. It wasn't just that he left, it was how he left, without shouting, without accusations, without theatrics. That was what made it crueler, sharper, more surgical. It was the quiet exposure, like flipping on the lights in a room she had been playing games in, only to find herself alone. That night, she pulled open her laptop and clicked through old files, searching for some kind of emotional foothold. Pictures from the wedding popped up. There she was, beaming in ivory, eyes locked on Daniel's. And there was Jared standing beside him as one of the groomsmen, arms slung casually around Daniel's shoulder in one of the reception shots. She had once captioned it, "Two of my favorite men." The irony wasn't lost on her now. She scrolled, faster and faster, looking for something that could rewrite the past, some image that might prove this wasn't her fault. But the photos were unchanging. They weren't lying. They simply reflected what had been and what had been broken. Somewhere in the middle of the night, Natalie walked over to the shelf and stared at the empty space again. She reached out, fingers brushing the spot where the DVD once rested, as though touching the void would bring it back. It didn't. Instead, the words hit her in waves, unspoken but loud in her head. Thought you'd want to know who she really belongs to. She didn't know what Jared had seen or how much Daniel had chosen to reveal, but she knew Jared had received something that made him disappear without warning, and she knew that whatever it was, Daniel had planned it without her ever seeing it coming. The house that once echoed with polite routines now whispered only regret. And Daniel, he was nowhere. No note, no forwarding address, not even a final goodbye. Just the truth left in his absence. Natalie began to notice just how loud the house had always been when Daniel was in it. Not from noise, but from presence. The faint whistle he made while boiling tea, the way he quietly shut the dishwasher with his foot while reading the news, even the subtle weight of him sitting on the far end of the couch, not touching her but somehow holding the room together. Now, in his absence, the walls felt thinner, the floors colder, and her own footsteps echoed like accusations. The quiet was no longer peaceful, it was pointed. She started cleaning, not because the house was messy, but because it gave her hands something to do. She moved with an edge of panic, scrubbing surfaces that were already spotless, rearranging shelves, lighting candles she never used. She found herself wiping the same framed wedding photo twice, then 3 times before setting it down face down on the table. She couldn't stand the way Daniel looked at her from it, not with anger, but with hope. That was worse. She checked her phone again, nothing from Jared. His absence no longer felt coincidental, it felt deliberate, coordinated, and suddenly the silence between them mirrored Daniel's silence. She thought about the DVD again, where it was, what it showed. What he must have felt as he pulled it from the shelf, wrapped it with that simple, surgical note, and mailed it off without a word. The man she had once thought too passive, too forgiving, had taken her entire house of mirrors and cracked it with a single, symbolic gesture. Natalie opened her laptop and searched through old messages between her and Jared. There was nothing scandalous at a glance, at least not enough to confirm what Daniel might have seen, but she knew what had been said, what had been implied. The secret meetings, the emotional innuendos disguised as jokes, the flirting dressed in irony. Daniel wasn't stupid. He had simply waited until he had no doubt. She sat down in the chair across from the DVD shelf and stared at the empty space again. It had become a wound now, a hollow gap that pulled her attention every time she walked through the room. Every moment since his disappearance felt heavier than the one before. Then came the knock, not at the door, but from inside her mind. A memory, that last Sunday brunch, she had laughed at Daniel's question, something mild, something casual, about Jared. He's like a brother, she'd replied, flicking her hair over her shoulders, sipping her mimosa with too much charm. And Daniel had smiled. Not the warm kind, the knowing kind. She'd ignored it then, too confident in her control of the story. Now she saw it for what it was, the beginning of the end. She picked up her phone again and called Jared one more time. Straight to voicemail. This time, she didn't leave a message. Instead, she walked back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, where Daniel used to read each night with a lamp that now hadn't been switched on in days. She stared at the spot where his book had always been on the nightstand, gone. Everything of his had been removed so deliberately, it chilled her. This wasn't a tantrum, this wasn't an impulsive walkout. It was an exit planned, with clarity. A reckoning, not a reaction. Natalie finally understood the brilliance of it. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't begged, he had simply let her sit with herself. No mirror, no distractions, just the echo of her own manipulation. And in that silence, the truth was louder than anything he ever needed to say. It wasn't until a full week had passed that Natalie truly realized he wasn't coming back. There was no dramatic announcement, no bitter voicemail, no scribbled farewell left on the counter. Daniel had simply erased himself, like the clean tear of a page from a book. Quiet, irreversible. He hadn't left her with fury, he'd left her with silence. And silence is harder to argue with. She stood alone in the living room one gray afternoon, staring blankly at the empty DVD shelf. That missing rectangle on the second row had become her obsession. Everything else was in place. Wedding photos, anniversary keepsakes, mementos from trips they took when things still felt real. But that one space remained open like a missing tooth in a flawless smile. Natalie reached up, tracing the edge of it with her fingers. It was absurd, she thought. A man had disappeared from her life, and she couldn't stop thinking about a piece of plastic. But it wasn't just plastic. It was the ceremony, the vows, the way she had once clutched Daniel's hands and promised to be honest, to be his home. It was every frame of a day meant to define forever. And he had sent it away to Jared. The note wasn't even cruel. That's what made it so effective. Thought you'd want to know who she really belongs to. No yelling, no threats, just clarity. An unflinching mirror held up in front of them both. Jared never replied. Whatever he saw in that footage, whatever realization passed through him, it had been enough to cut the cord completely. He didn't need closure. He already had the truth, served on Daniel's terms. Now Natalie had only the echo of her own voice in that house. The walls didn't answer. The couch didn't shift under Daniel's weight. The hallway no longer creaked under his evening steps. He hadn't just walked out. He had peeled away every piece of himself, leaving nothing for her to cling to. She sank onto the couch, staring at the blank spot on the shelf. The only thing left in that house was the lie. He's just like a brother. And now it was the only thing still echoing back.